President Donald Trump has singled out Princess Kate during his state banquet speech at Windsor Castle, praising her as radiant, healthy, and so beautiful as she sat on his right.
I also love this little dig I feel like he took at Prince Harry. No mention of Prince Harry, just glowing about how much he loved the Prince and Princess of Wales.
Melania and I are delighted to visit again with Prince William and to see Her Royal Highness, Princess Catherine. So radiant and so healthy, so beautiful.
The chandeliers of Windsor Castle glittered like 1,000 stars as history quietly prepared to unfold. Yet no one watching that night could have predicted the moment that would set the world buzzing. This was no ordinary banquet, no simple exchange of speeches and champagne toasts. This was a collision of worlds, a night where tradition brushed against unpredictability, and one gesture would become the headline of the century. Imagine the scene: the polished marble floors reflecting golden light, the rustle of silk gowns gliding across the hall, the rhythmic clink of crystal glasses placed with precision by palace staff trained for perfection. Every detail whispered of power, of legacy, of centuries-old ritual. But beneath the pageantry, there lingered a tension you could almost touch. Cameras rolled, pens hovered, and millions of eyes waited to see whether this dinner would run smoothly or erupt into the kind of spectacle only a certain American guest could inspire. But the heart of the evening wasn't the politics, nor the policy, nor even the endless banquet courses. It was a single, charged encounter between a man who thrives on spectacle and a woman destined to be queen. What he did next would blur the line between formality and familiarity, respect and controversy, admiration and awkwardness. And as the words left his lips, the gasp that rippled through the room proved one thing beyond doubt. This night would not be remembered for its diplomacy, but for the shocking gesture that placed the future of the monarchy under a blinding global spotlight. Stay with me, because what unfolded in those glittering halls may just have reshaped how the world sees Britain's crown.
It was so cute. She looked at him and smiled. Obviously, she was a knockout at this banquet in this gold dress, tiara.
It wasn't just another evening at Windsor. It was a stage set so carefully that every sound, every step, and every flicker of candlelight seemed part of a centuries-old performance meant to impress and awe. Imagine the vast quadrangle outside the castle, its cobblestones gleaming under a soft English drizzle that had only just cleared. The air smelled faintly of roses from the palace gardens, freshly trimmed to perfection, as if nature itself had been pressed into service for the occasion. Trumpets blared, echoing off the castle's stone walls with a commanding resonance that made even seasoned diplomats stand a little straighter. Inside, footmen in crimson uniforms moved like clockwork, adjusting velvet ropes, aligning chairs, and ensuring that every polished silver fork gleamed with mirror-like precision. The grandeur wasn't simply for show. It was a deliberate reminder that Windsor was more than a royal residence. It was a symbol of endurance, tradition, and continuity. Guests whispered to one another as they entered the great hall, struck by the scale of the preparations, the towering floral arrangements bursting with white lilies and orchids, and the soft strains of a chamber orchestra weaving through the room like a spell. It was a moment of heightened anticipation, the kind that makes the air feel thicker, as though everyone present knew they were about to witness something that would ripple far beyond the castle walls. Each tick of the grand clock above the staircase seemed louder, slower, stretching the suspense. Because while the night had been planned down to the smallest detail, what no one could script was how a certain guest would behave once seated among the royals. And as the hall filled with hushed excitement, a question lingered, unspoken but undeniable. Would this banquet be remembered for its grace or for the unexpected?
His Majesty has also raised a remarkable son in His Royal Highness Prince of Wales. Really amazing. We've gotten to know you, and I think you're going to have an unbelievable success in future.
The moment the rotors of Marine One sliced through the stillness of the English sky, Windsor became something out of a storybook, half theater and half legend. From the castle's battlements, the sound rolled like distant thunder, rattling windows and drawing every gaze skyward. Then came the cannon fire, a 21-gun salute, each shot reverberating through the ancient stone walls like a drumbeat of history itself. Overhead, the Royal Air Force painted streaks of red, white, and blue against the clouds, a soaring spectacle that blended power with poetry. On the ground, the courtyard gleamed, its cobblestones glistening under a late afternoon glow that seemed almost too perfect, as if nature had conspired with the planners to frame this arrival in cinematic brilliance. Crowds lined the distant streets, their cheers swelling into a chorus that mixed with the drone of engines and the crisp cadence of the household cavalry's hooves. Polished breastplates caught the sun, throwing off shards of light that danced across the assembled crowd, while the rhythmic march of boots on stone created a heartbeat for the occasion. Inside the castle gates, staff watched silently from the shadows, eyes trained on every detail, as if any small misstep could disturb the harmony of the scene. This was more than a welcome. It was a performance centuries in the making, a symphony of sound, color, and ritual that told the world exactly what Windsor Castle represented: grandeur that endures, spectacle that unites, and tradition strong enough to command silence even from the skies. And yet, as magnificent as the pageantry appeared, every eye knew that the true drama had not yet begun, because once the guests crossed the threshold into Windsor's golden halls, what followed would make the thunder of cannons seem like a whisper compared to the storm of attention waiting to erupt. Before a single toast was raised, the first sparks of the evening ignited with the sweep of gowns and the shimmer of jewels. Because in Windsor Castle's Great Hall, fashion was more than fabric. It was silent storytelling, broadcast in sequins, silk, and sparkle. When Catherine stepped into view, the room seemed to exhale as though her presence itself was a kind of performance. Draped in a bespoke Philippa Lepley silk gown that caught the light with every movement, she radiated an elegance that was both timeless and unmistakably modern. The gold chantilly lace coat that framed her shoulders shimmered under the chandeliers, its embroidery almost glowing, like sunlight stitched into fabric. But it was the tiara.
I think it will be the picture of her. It's the best picture of her I've seen in her entire life. And I used to just love to look at her wedding day photos.
Diana's beloved lover's knot that sealed the effect, sending a ripple of whispers down the long banquet table. It wasn't just jewelry, it was history, emotion, and unspoken symbolism resting delicately above her smile. Across the room, Melania Trump made her entrance in a vivid gown designed to command attention, its bold cut and gleaming fabric sparking its own wave of commentary. The contrast between the two women, Catherine's royal grace and Melania's striking glamour, created a visual duel without a word spoken. Photographers knew instantly they had their headline images, two figures embodying different kinds of presence, each dazzling in their own right. The orchestra softened as though giving the gowns their own overture, while guests shifted subtly in their seats, caught between admiration and curiosity. In that moment, the atmosphere changed, not tense, but charged, like the quiet hum before lightning strikes, because while the night had only just begun, the spectacle of fashion had already done its work, setting the stage for rivalries, rumors, and revelations that would carry far beyond Windsor's walls. And little did anyone know, the grandest shock of the evening was still waiting in the shadows. It was the kind of moment that seemed to freeze time, the kind where even the air feels heavy, waiting for something no one can quite predict. The guests had barely settled into their seats when it happened, an action so small yet so startling that it instantly rewrote the atmosphere of the evening. As Catherine approached, her gown whispering across the polished floor, the guest of honor made a move no one had rehearsed, a deep, deliberate bow. Not the casual nod of acknowledgement, not the subtle incline one might expect, but a full gesture that startled some into silence and drew others into barely concealed gasps. The cameras caught it instantly, the bow framed against the glitter of chandeliers and the watchful gaze of the portraits that lined St. George's Hall, their painted eyes forever staring down on the living drama below. For a second, no one moved. It was as though the centuries-old etiquette of Windsor had collided with an unscripted spark of theater, and the result was electric. Then came the seating, a detail that at first glance seemed simple, but carried layers of unspoken meaning.
Melania and I are delighted to visit again with Prince William and to see Her Royal Highness, Princess Catherine, so radiant and so healthy, so beautiful.
At the head of the banquet table, nearly 160 seats stretching out in gleaming symmetry, the arrangement spoke volumes. To one side, King Charles, stately and calm. To the other, Catherine, her tiara glinting like a crown not yet worn but already claimed in spirit. And further down the line, separated by distance that seemed deliberate, Prince William, the heir himself. Guests exchanged glances that said more than words ever could. Was it chance? Was it choice? Or was it another unscripted twist in an evening already brimming with symbolism? Whatever the answer, one truth was clear. This wasn't just dinner anymore. It was theater, and the stage had only just been set for what would come next. Every banquet has a centerpiece, but on this night, it wasn't the venison course or the gilded candelabras. It was a single moment when the room seemed to lean forward as one, waiting for words that would either pass quietly or echo far beyond the castle walls. The clink of glasses faded, the orchestra hushed, and all eyes turned to the guest of honor as he rose for the toast. His voice carried easily under the vaulted ceilings, steady but charged with the weight of an audience that stretched from the high-backed chairs of St. George's Hall to millions who would watch the footage later. He spoke of friendship, of tradition, of shared respect, but it was when his gaze settled firmly on Catherine that the evening's defining spark was lit. With a flourish of his glass, he described her as radiant, healthy, and the future queen of this great nation. The words seemed simple, almost harmless, yet the impact was immediate. A ripple of reaction swept down the banquet table, guests shifting, whispers rising, even the faintest flutter of surprise flickering across faces trained to reveal nothing. For just a heartbeat, time bent around that phrase, because it was not not only an honor, but also a statement, one that placed Catherine firmly in the spotlight in a way protocol never quite had before. Some heard it as admiration, others as a slip, and a few as something more deliberate. But whatever the interpretation, the result was the same. The great hall pulsed with a new energy, as though centuries of ritual had just been jolted by a flash of raw, unscripted candor. And as Catherine smiled graciously, raising her glass in acknowledgement, the moment became immortal. Not just a toast, but a declaration that would ignite endless speculation once the night was over.
On behalf of all Americans, I offer a toast to one of the great friendships, two great countries, and to His Majesty, King Charles III, a very, very special man, and also a very, very special queen. Thank you very much.
The toast had barely settled into silence when the evening shifted again. This time not with words, but with atmosphere so rich it seemed almost alive. St. George's Hall glowed like a jewel box, every crystal chandelier dripping light that danced across polished silverware and endless rows of sparkling glasses. The scent of Windsor venison, roasted to perfection and garnished with sprigs of rosemary, mingled with the delicate sweetness of orchard pears served on golden-rimmed china, creating an aroma that wrapped itself around the guests like a velvet curtain. The soft hum of the orchestra rose once more, violins weaving a melody that threaded through conversation and laughter, until it became clear this was not just a dinner, it was a performance of senses. Conversation ebbed and flowed like a tide, but the undercurrent of curiosity remained, everyone still replaying the toast in their minds, wondering if the evening's drama had reached its peak. And then, as though scripted by fate rather than planners, the night gave them something entirely unexpected. Rising from his chair with a surprising grace, the guest of honor extended his hand to Catherine. For a heartbeat, the room paused, every eye fixed on her as she accepted, her silk gown shimmering as she stood. Together they moved onto the gleaming floor, and the orchestra answered instantly, sliding into a gentle waltz that filled the hall with rhythm and wonder. It wasn't long, it wasn't rehearsed, but it was enough to etch itself into memory. A short, deliberate turn beneath the chandeliers, her tiara catching the light like starlight caught in glass. Some called it bold, others whispered it was unexpected, but all agreed it transformed the banquet from regal ritual into legend. And as they returned to their seats, the whispers surged like a tide, because no one could deny it. The night had just written another chapter of history, and the page was still turning.
Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan are probably sitting on their couch, eating bonbons or whatever she's thrown flower sprinkles on. And I love to see them all shine.
Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't made with words at all. It's made with a single gesture. As the waltz ended and the hall returned to its rhythm of clinking glasses and murmured conversation, all eyes shifted toward King Charles. For a moment, the monarch simply observed, his expression composed, unreadable beneath the grandeur of the chandeliers. Then, with deliberate calm, he reached across and placed a hand firmly on the guest's shoulder. It was brief, almost subtle, but it carried the unmistakable weight of approval, and the atmosphere rippled with the recognition of what had just occurred. Guests leaned closer, whispers darting like sparks across the long banquet table, because in a hall governed by ritual and restraint, even the smallest sign from the king could feel monumental. Elsewhere, photographers captured another rare moment. William and Catherine exchanging a fleeting touch of hands, an understated but telling gesture that seemed to speak volumes about unity and reassurance. By the time the night gave way to dawn, those snapshots were racing across social media, igniting debate under the hashtag Trump bows to Kate. Some called it classy, others awkward, but no one denied it was unforgettable. What lingered was not just what had been said or done, but how the royals themselves responded with grace, subtlety, and just enough mystery to keep the world guessing. Sunrise over Windsor burns pink across battlements as headlines roar. Trump crowns Kate, Camilla sideline, Charles plays long game. Royal analysts parse strategy. By conceding spotlight to Catherine, Charles shores up next-generation loyalty while avoiding accusations of ego. Trump's team claims a masterclass in soft power, framing the bow and toast as respect for enduring allies. Republicans thrilled by monarchical grandeur applaud. Progressive Brits see that perceived patriarchal theatrics. Yet data shows something subtler. 12% spike in international interest for royal charity pages, a flood of American tourism inquiries for Windsor tours, and a rare bump in Charles's domestic approval. Behind palace doors, insiders say Camilla is sanguine, knowing lineage trumps optics. William, rumored stern, is already plotting next public appearance to reassert relevance. So who really won? Maybe everyone. Crown, campaign, and curious viewers now hooked on pomp. Or maybe the monarchy bartered dignity for viral reach. You decide. And that's the royal scoop for today. If you're still curious about how a single photo can change the monarchy's public image, jump over to our last upload. Don't leave without smashing that like button, subscribing, and ringing the bell so you never miss the drama here on Star Spotlight. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.